Have you ever found yourself standing perfectly still, keys already in your hand, knowing you must leave now, yet you postpone the motion for just another 3 minutes? It isn't laziness, it's a quiet, almost imperceptible negotiation happening within you, a subconscious battle to claim one last, precious breath of stillness before confronting the high-velocity demands of the external world. For most of us, there is a person we know who is always chronically late. And for some of us, if we are truly honest in this dim light, we are that person. We carry the quiet guilt, the breathlessness of the constant rush, and the knowledge that our lateness feels personal, even when we promise it is not. But this conversation is not about time management. It is about a deeper, more fundamental truth. Chronic lateness has very little to do with clocks and everything to do with a quiet psychological mechanism. It is a symptom of emotional misalignment, a signal from a nervous system that is exhausted, overwhelmed, and trying desperately to buy itself some space. When someone is consistently late, they are often struggling with something far heavier than a mere scheduling conflict. They are grappling with a heavy, unarticulated fear, the fear of inadequacy, the fear of judgment, and the deep, silent burden of expectations they feel they cannot meet. The initial feeling, the small, tight anxiety you feel while waiting for someone, or the frantic tightening in your chest when you realize you are the one running behind, is often a deflection. It makes the issue seem small, transactional. But patterns do not build themselves by accident. They are built by the persistent, unaddressed friction between your inner life and the rigid structure of the outer world. If you have lived long enough with the burden of constantly running behind, you have felt that deeper truth. You are late not because you do not care, but because you might care too much. You are caught in a silent, desperate pursuit of perfection just before the deadline. Or you are engaging in a quiet, subconscious rebellion against a schedule that feels oppressive and controlling. This isn't irresponsibility. This is a quiet, continuous act of trying to protect your inner resources. The real core pain is the emotional exhaustion and cognitive overwhelm that has pushed your mind to a breaking point where the distinction between 5 minutes and 20 minutes begins to blur. The time we spend running behind is merely the visible ledger of an invisible internal debt, a debt owed to an unrelenting schedule, a debt of self-doubt, and a heavy debt of unmet expectations that have accumulated over years. Lateness is simply the moment your psychological balance sheet is rendered visible. The feeling often begins not with the frantic panic of realizing you're late, but with a moment of almost unnatural stillness. Imagine yourself in your kitchen, the morning sun casting long, quiet lines across the floor. You know, intellectually, that you must be out the door in 2 minutes. Your coat is on the chair, your keys are on the hook, and the car is waiting. Everything is in place. Yet, you stop. Perhaps you pick up a ceramic mug that is cooled and hold it. Perhaps you find an old email you meant to answer yesterday and decide, just 1 minute for this. Or maybe you simply stand there, letting the silence of the space consume you. This isn't deliberate sabotage. This is the liminal space, a threshold between your private, quiet world and the harsh, demanding theater of public life. Your internal logic whispers a lie you desperately want to believe. You have more time than you think. Everything will cooperate today. Traffic will be light. That one task will only take a second. This is the hopeful, almost poetic belief in a reality where external friction does not exist. It's the moment your mind engages the soft buffer, a subtle, unconscious mechanism to slow the pace just enough to allow your emotions to catch up. For the habitually late, time becomes elastic. They live inside a Chronos Drift, where their internal emotional clock has detached from the external objective clock. They don't track time linearly, they track it emotionally. And when they are pulled into an internal task, a thought, a memory, or an unfinished detail, time disappears. The world outside the window ceases to exist. They are entirely absorbed. This drift is why simple tasks suddenly balloon. It's why checking an email becomes a 5-minute commitment. Or why one final adjustment to an outfit costs 10 minutes. The mind doesn't calculate the task based on its physical requirements. It calculates it based on the emotional inertia required to stop the current state and transition into the next. And for someone running on empty, that transition requires enormous, often inaccessible mental energy. They are not careless. They are simply running out of fuel for the mental leap required to switch contexts. The seconds pile up like small, imperceptible stones placed on a scale, until suddenly the weight tips and the realization hits. I am late again. To understand the Chronos Drift, we have to look deeper into the structures that govern motivation and engagement. This is where we touch the cold, hard wiring of the nervous system. When you are chronically overwhelmed, stressed, or carrying a heavy emotional load, the weight of expectations, financial anxiety, or subtle trauma, your nervous system responds not just with panic, but often with fatigue and quiet shutdown. The body is trying to conserve energy. This brings us to the reward system, powered significantly by the neurotransmitter dopamine. Dopamine is not simply the pleasure chemical, it is the motivation and anticipation chemical. It is the signal that tells your brain, go, this transition is worth the effort. In those who struggle with persistent emotional exhaustion, the reward system can become blunted. The constant stress diminishes the sensitivity and availability of dopamine. The mind loses its ability to clearly perceive the emotional payoff of doing things on time. Think of it like a fading radio signal. The signal that says, get up now and be on time, is still technically broadcasting, but the volume is turned way down. It's mostly static. The subtle emotional reward of punctuality, the feeling of competence, the calm of arrival, is not enough to overcome the internal friction. The mind simply doesn't register the difference in reward between being on time and being 10 minutes late. This blunting is a mild but crucial form of emotional anhedonia, the loss of the capacity to feel pleasure or motivation, applied specifically to the realm of time and tasks. The result is a phenomenon I call emotional inertia. Just as a physical object resists a change in motion, your exhausted mind resists a change in emotional state or task context. Ending a conversation, closing a laptop, or simply stepping over the threshold of your door all require an energetic shift. When the dopamine signal is weak, the mind defaults to the path of least resistance. Stay put. The delay is not a choice. It is a neurological default, a protective mechanism to prevent further depletion of an already empty reservoir. This neurological reality leads directly into the psychological roots of lateness, which are complex and often contradictory. The person who is chronically late is rarely one thing. They are a confluence of several emotional pressures acting in concert. One of the most powerful forces is the future self trap, which is the psychological flip side of the planning fallacy. You don't fail to plan. You overestimate your future self. You tell yourself that the version of you who exists 30 minutes from now will be smarter, more efficient, less tired, and possess superhuman focus. This future self will somehow be able to execute the entire transition perfectly and quickly. This hope, while charming in other areas of life, becomes a powerful form of self-sabotage. It is a desperate, recurring promise that tomorrow will be better, allowing you to shirk responsibility today. Then there is the issue of emotional avoidance. For many, the act of delaying is a form of psychological self-soothing. If the event they are heading toward is stressful, intimidating, or involves confrontation, their mind instinctively slows the transition. The lateness serves as a soft buffer against anxiety. Every minute they delay is a minute they don't have to face the pressure. It's a quiet, unconscious attempt to stretch the liminal space of safety just a little longer. We also see the influence of perfectionism. Some are late because they are trying to do too much in the remaining time. They want to show up prepared, presentable, and ready. That final check, that one last tweak, that extra moment of preparation is driven by a deep-seated fear of being judged, of being seen as inadequate. Their lateness is not a lack of care. It is too much care directed at the wrong moment, a frantic attempt to control an outcome they inherently fear. The 5 minutes lost to adjusting a collar or fixing an email is the tax paid on their anxiety. These psychological pressures, the trap of the future self, emotional avoidance, and perfectionism driven by fear, all contribute to the Chronos Drift. They are all emotional weights pulling the compass of their internal rhythm away from the north of objective time. If we strip away the surface-level behavior, the apologies, the excuses, the frantic arrival, we can finally reach the essential insight, the quiet admission that most people are afraid to voice. The person who is always late is engaging in a silent confession of their exhaustion. Their lateness is not a flaw in character. It is a profound signal that they are carrying more internal weight than they can manage. It is a psychological defense mechanism, screaming for space and quiet. This is the hard truth. Lateness is the bill you pay for carrying too much. Your mind, tired of juggling 20 obligations, worries, and expectations, has quietly resigned from the role of timekeeper. It has prioritized self-preservation over punctuality. The 5 minutes you steal are the 5 minutes you need to simply transition from one anxious state to the next. Furthermore, lateness often reflects a conflict with self-belief. Those who underestimate how long tasks take, the people who chronically overcommit, often do so because they underestimate themselves. They push themselves into too many responsibilities, hoping to prove their value through their busyness. Yet, deep down, they fear they cannot handle it. This fear manifests as the rush, the micro-optimism, and the inevitable failure to meet the schedule. Their lateness is not a mark of disrespect toward the person waiting. It is an often unconscious act of resistance against the relentless schedule that has stripped their life of joy and calm. They are reclaiming the only thing they feel they can control, the timing of their appearance. It is a small, quiet whisper of independence in a life that feels overwhelmingly controlled by external demands and expectations. And until the emotional pressure is understood and eased, no amount of organizational tips can fix the fundamental drift. Once we frame lateness not as a fault, but as a signal, a piece of critical, often urgent data, the conversation changes entirely. We move away from self-criticism and towards introspection. This signal reveals where your personal, internal landscape conflicts most violently with the external structure of time. It tells you exactly which transitions or events carry the most emotional weight. For instance, if you are consistently late to staff meetings that make you feel anxious or inadequate, but you are always on time for your morning coffee ritual or a call with a close friend, the signal is clear. The issue is not the clock, but the emotional cost of the destination. Lateness also serves as a profound metaphor for being detached from your own life. When you are perpetually rushing, you are living ahead of the clock, always thinking about the next moment, the next task, the next apology. But paradoxically, you are also living behind your own rhythm, never truly caught up to your emotional needs. You are never fully present in the moment you are currently inhabiting because you are constantly trying to compensate for the one you have already missed. This perpetual state of catching up strips the present moment of its texture and joy. This is another subtle manifestation of anhedonia, not just a lack of pleasure in an activity, but a lack of presence during it. If your mind is always racing to the future, you cannot be emotionally available to the present. You are physically present, but emotionally dissociated, which is the core affliction of modern, hollow life. The lateness is simply the outer manifestation of this inner detachment. We must stop treating the schedule as the ultimate moral authority and start listening to the signal it produces. That signal is asking, what are you running away from? What are you afraid of facing? What are you carrying that is too heavy to carry on time? We have established that the issue is not a character flaw, but a pattern of emotional misalignment and exhaustion. Therefore, the path toward a more aligned relationship with time cannot begin with rigid self-discipline. It must begin with compassion and self-awareness. We must first engage in gentle guidance toward our future self. Stop lying to the person you will be in 30 minutes. The planning fallacy thrives on self-deception. Instead of promising yourself, I can do this quickly, begin by telling yourself the quiet, compassionate truth. I need more time than I think I do, and that is perfectly acceptable. This is not a failure. It is an act of recognizing and honoring your emotional reality. If you know that every emotional transition costs you 5 extra minutes, then build those 5 minutes into the schedule. That extra time is not wasted. It is the cost of your emotional transition tax. Pay it willingly. Next, you must learn to map the emotional cost. Start tracking not just what you are late for, but how you feel right before you start delaying. Does anxiety creep in? Do you feel pressure to be perfect? Do you feel a wave of resistance? By identifying the emotional trigger, you can address the root cause, not the behavior. For example, if you realize you delay leaving for a particular social event out of social anxiety, the solution is not an earlier alarm, but a 5-minute grounding exercise before you walk out the door. This is the true work, learning to work with your nature, not against it. You are not trying to change who you are. You are simply trying to understand the invisible weights you carry. The ultimate goal is not the perfect arrival time. The true aim of this long, quiet journey is emotional alignment. It is about ensuring that the rhythm of your inner world, your needs, your fears, your hopes, is synchronized, or at least harmonious, with the rhythm of the external world. For the person who has spent a lifetime running a few minutes behind, true recovery isn't a sudden, heroic act of punctuality. It is a quiet, almost anticlimactic realization that one day you simply showed up on time, not because you forced it, but because the internal resistance had finally subsided. This is the moment of self-acceptance. It is the realization that you have stopped making promises to be a superhuman version of yourself and started making promises to be present with the human you are today, flawed, tired, and in need of space. You realize that your value is not tied to your clock. When you achieve this alignment, you begin to see time differently. You stop seeing it as an enemy to be chased or a resource to be squeezed. Time becomes a partner. You learn to recognize and respect your own natural limits, what overwhelms you, what triggers your micro-optimism, and what emotional tax you must pay for different transitions. You move from self-judgment, why can't I do this right, to compassionate inquiry, what does time feel like for me right now? The freedom from the chronic rush is not the freedom of having more time, it is the freedom of having more presence. It is the gentle return to the moment, a subtle shift that changes everything. The story of the chronically late person is, in the end, a reflection of a truth we all share. We are all, in some profound way, struggling to align our messy, complex inner world with the unforgiving structure of the outer world. We all know what it feels like to fall behind, to carry the quiet, crushing guilt of not being the perfectly organized, energetic person we hoped we would be. We all overestimate our future self, only to find ourselves breathless and apologetic in the present. The person who is always late is not an anomaly. They are simply the physical manifestation of a psychological struggle that touches every single one of us. The yearning to slow life down, the desire to hold on to moments of peace, and the exhaustion felt under the weight of expectations. Lateness is human. It is emotional. It is a quiet, desperate attempt to reclaim a tiny piece of autonomy in a life that feels too large and too fast. And perhaps the most powerful revelation of all is this: no one is permanently stuck in the Chronos Drift. Once you gain the language and the compassion to understand the emotional meaning beneath your behavior, to see your lateness not as a moral failure, but as a signal of distress, the path to change reveals itself. The shift is small, quiet, and gradual. It is the beginning of a new relationship with time, built on honesty, self-awareness, and the gentle understanding that the ultimate goal is not punctuality, but wholeness. You begin living not behind the clock, nor desperately ahead of it, but simply with it, side by side, step by step, moment by moment. And that soft human alignment is the place where true peace finally resides.